Hello everyone and welcome to the SkyTouch Technology webinar on the importance of EMV for hotels. With Europay MasterCard Visa, also known as EMV, quickly becoming the global standard for chip-based transactions, credit card data is no longer being stored at the PMS level, but rather tokenized. Why is this important? To help prevent chargebacks and fraudulent use of stolen credit card data. My name is Joshua Molina and I will be your host today. Joining me is a panel of experts on this topic, Charlie Green from SkyTouch Technology and Jimmy Navarro from Shift4. And we'd love to hear your questions. If you have a question, please type them in the WebEx chat bar under Q&A so that we can see your questions. First, we'll hear from Charlie Green. Charlie is Director of Product Management at SkyTouch Technology. With 25 years in the hotel industry, Charlie Green has a passion for hospitality and powered by technology. Charlie has been with SkyTouch since its inception and oversees product management and product partnerships. Charlie?
Thanks, Josh. So exciting to have all of these wonderful folks on the line interested in this very important topic with EMV. So one of the first things we'll talk about is why. Why should we care about this? So many of us have seen these headlines. They seem to come out very often, week after week, we see something. And this is just a small sample of those focused specifically on hospitality. But as you can see, it's just a continuation, one after another after another. And so we want to make sure that we have solutions in place to help protect hoteliers from these breaches, which are not just happening at hotels, but happening anywhere credit card data exists. And as we get more secure about where we store our credit cards and how we deal with credit card security, the bad guys are going and looking for the holes. And as you can see, recently they found holes in hospitality. So let's talk a little bit about EMV and the realities of the U.S. We're one of the last markets in the world to transition to EMV, and it actually is a bit more complicated in the United States than it was in different places around the world. In the United States, we already had a very strong integrated environment for payments. So basically, the expectation for the consumer and the business was that transactions would be live and happen instantaneously, and that worked out really well. Other places in the world did not have the direct integration with their property management system or their point-of-sale systems. So when they transitioned from one standalone device to a new standalone device, it was a much easier process for them. Also, in other countries around the world, you find that the banking situation is also very different. The competitive marketplace for banking and credit card merchant banks is much, much more vibrant in the United States than you see in other countries. In other places in the world, you may have a choice of one or two or three or four banks, and they basically control the credit card marketplace versus the U.S. where you have hundreds of banks, thousands of MSOs, lots of options with credit card gateways and merchant service providers. It's just a very different world here. We also, of course, have multiple debit card networks, the Visa debit card product itself, which is not as often found in other places in the world. So with all that complexity, the rest of the world had it pretty much easy, and in the U.S., we have continued to fight the complexity that we find here. The other key distinction is that the lodging industry in the United States and in Canada and North America is very different than what you find in the rest of the world. And our payment processing was much, much more integrated than you find in other countries. So we found that our processes also had to be addressed in different ways than they found around the world. And that led to quite a bit of complication even during the process of building out our solutions for lodging. We required some changes that continued to happen, almost up until the October 15th time frame for the liability shift. Next slide. So it's a complex thing. Why is it important to hotels? As we saw, hotel companies are now being targeted by the bad guys more and more often. So what can you as a hotel do? First thing is, with the liability shift, if you're not currently supporting chip card transactions when a guest presents you with a chip card, you are in a state of your liability would shift to basically the weakest link. So you don't want to be that weakest link. If you are swiping chipped cards because you do not have an EMV reader, you will be much, much more at risk for chargeback. Also, you frankly are at more risk for actual fraudulent transactions because of the bad guys and their ability to create cards that maybe don't match what's on the chip. The good news, of course, is that deployment is increasing. So in 2016, we saw 38% of businesses had EMV devices, and in 2017, we're up to 50%. And in 2017, we're seeing 70% of consumers are actually using their EMV cards. I think we saw last year quite a bit of penetration and change out as the card companies actually began sending all the consumers new cards with the EMV chip. So the environment is drastically changed from what we saw even in the summer of 2015, so that the consumers are expecting to use chips and businesses are beginning to look to meet that need. Next slide. So what can you as a hotelier do? Well, the first and best thing that you can do is actually get your EMV devices, install them, and actually use them. We do see that occasionally hotels will make the investment, get the devices, but their practices don't always lead them to use the devices as frequently as they should. If you do that, you're going to be benefiting from advanced encryption. So basically, what that does is we no longer store valuable data for the bad guys in your systems. That's all encrypted. So when they get some of that data, there's nothing they can really do with it. So encryption is really key, and that's core to the EMV process. When you're supporting chip cards properly, you will reduce your losses from chargebacks because the liability is no longer automatically shifted to you in the case of fraudulent cards. Your guests are going to feel more confident that you are securely handling their data by using the chip cards. You see a lot of, I know, in just your consumer experience, when you're the consumer, I know we're still seeing quite a bit of those terminals that have been deployed that are not yet supporting chip transactions. You want to make sure that you're supporting those chip transactions, and you want to make sure that the interfaces that you have with your systems are supporting that. With chip cards, you potentially could face discounts. You could potentially get discounted interchange fees because these transactions are considered more secure. You also have the ability to begin to process signature and PIN-enabled cards. So one of the things that I think may confuse businesses is when we first heard about EMV, we heard about chip and PIN, which basically meant that when you used your credit card, you were actually having to put in a PIN number as well. In the U.S., most of the card brands and most of the card issuers have decided that they want to go with chip and signature, which most closely mimics the existing magstripe credit card environment from how the interaction between the merchant and the cardholder goes. That's actually a decision that each card issuer can make. Your devices know what to do in either case. There's really nothing for you as the merchant to worry about there, and the devices will prompt the guest or the consumer to do what is required for their cards. One of the key ones that went with the PIN enablement, Target, famous for their breach a couple years ago, when they began issuing chip cards, they went with the PIN-enabled route. It does provide a bit more security than the signature, but it is completely based on the card issuer. You as the merchant and us as the technology provider do not play a role in making that decision. Also, these devices tend to support contactless payments such as Apple Pay, Android Pay, where you can use your watch, you can use your phone. This type of technology, you do need these EMV devices in order to begin to support that. And in many cases, your provider will also allow you to capture the guest signature with that card transaction, so that when the guest signs, they will actually, you can access that stored digital signature as well. So these are things that come as a benefit when you move on to EMV. So how does SkyTouch help? First, we began our partnership with Shift4 and Ingenico. Ingenico is a vendor of the card swipe and dip devices. We began developing our solution in 2013. Interesting thing here is even between 2013 and when we began to roll out, the requirements changed quite a bit as the EMV process changed to support North American practices, U.S. practices specifically. We also had the added complexity of being completely cloud-based, and so we had to work with these partners to develop how would this work with a browser-based PMS or POS and these hardwired devices. So we began that process in 2013. Our actual first SkyTouch HotelOS customer, they were actually onboarded in February of 2016. Towards the end of that certification cycle, it took a bit longer than I think most anticipated for many reasons, not the least of which was the changing requirements by the EMV organizations. Today, we have over 2,500 hotels and over 3,800 devices deployed in the United States, and that makes this one of the largest in the PMS space to cover our customers. All of our customers have the capability today of setting up EMV, and we support that for all of them. The hotels themselves are deciding when they want to transition. When they do want to transition, we make it really easy. We have a team of experts that know how to do this, can help you with what business processes may change, and can help you with where to go to get your device and manage the process to actually update your merchant accounts and work with your partner to be able to accept EMV. Josh.
Thank you, Charlie. Lots of great information. Next, we'll hear from Jimmy Navarro, Business Development Associate at Shift4. Jimmy has over 30 years of experience in all areas of management, customer service, and sales, and he'll be talking to us in more detail of how Shift4 is helping hotels with their EMV solution.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. And just want to mention I'm very excited to be here today. Let me just start with the next slide. Oh, yeah. All right. So what went wrong on the beginning with the EMV? First thing is that there wasn't enough time for the banks, the processors, even the credit card holders to adjust for this new change that occurred. It was a huge change. Also, there was a lot of moving parts that were involved. Next. The other thing went wrong is there ended up being a couple of lawsuits, most of them from supermarkets. We had either Home Depot, Walmart, there were some liquor stores. There was a couple of merchants that grouped together and doing a class action lawsuits against, primarily with Visa, in regards to the change with the EMV. The 8% when the EMV shift started back in October 2015 was only 8%. That was pretty much merchants, some knew that it wasn't actually a law or a mandate, and thought that everything was going to be fine. The only thing that they weren't aware of was the liability shift that was going to go over to the merchants along with the chargebacks. Next. All right, so who benefits from this EMV shift? Pretty much is the credit card industry, Visa, MasterCard, savings in regards to cost. Disputes now, if you don't have an EMV device, is now being shifted over to the merchants, along with any kind of counterfeit cards. If you don't have that EMV terminal, all that is being transferred over to the business owner, and the merchant is absorbing the loss. Not just that, as I mentioned earlier, with the chargebacks, you're also going to be paying chargeback fees from the processors. So who doesn't benefit? It's pretty much the customers and the merchants. On the merchant side is the change on the terminals. So from a magnetic swipe reader, now you're going to an EMV device. The cost of having a new device being added on. Before this, businesses can go on, even like an eBay, and buy a swiper for $50 or less. Now with these EMV devices, with the injection that occurs, you're looking at least maybe $300 for a basic one, up to maybe $1,000, depending on the model or the features that it carries. The other disbenefit was also with the learning curve for the employees and also for the consumers. End-of-day batching, having to learn to use the new terminal, or how to do a refund. Those kind of tasks that were simple before, and now we're challenging with the EMV change. Next. So EMV from a processor's perspective is the cost. That was pretty much changed. What used to cost, as an example, 15 cents for a credit card. Now the processors, say for example, the capital ones, American Express, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, those companies now had to pay with the chip cards between $2 to $4 for each card. Now, might not seem a lot, but as of 2017, early this year, the United States alone has over 176 million credit cards. So if you do the math, at $4 a card, how much did it cost these businesses to reissue new cards, even though the cards had not expired on the consumer? Next. So back in 2011, the EMV liability shift started in Canada, so Shift4 was there in regards to assisting with processing EMV devices to businesses over in Canada with the processors of Global Payments and Monera. Those are the two that we currently work with that are certified with interfacing with EMV. We also work with not just the hotels, also with food and beverage, retail businesses. On the screen, what you see is here in the United States, when the EMV shift started back in October 1st of 2015, since it wasn't new to us, we already have been doing it since 2011. It was a little much easier for us. We have all these processors, all the major ones that we work with. We are processor neutral, so we're not bound by any particular processor to work with a merchant. If they switch, we have no problem with having them switch, say, from a Chase over to a First Data processor. Next. All right, so here's what the merchants are thinking. Okay, I've gone through the struggle, I've had to change to an EMV device. Perfect, okay, I'm good, I'm protected. That was one of the misconceptions that occurred with the EMV shift. With businesses buying the devices, they thought that it was actually going to protect them from hacks or any kind of breaches. In reality, all it is just a card-present fraud protection. The main issue for the EMV that was started was to reduce and stop the counterfeit cards, credit cards that were being made and losses to the card association. Hotels now, what we have is pretty much 3 different parts to help with security, not just with the EMV, and Shift4 has that solution for you. Next. All right, so what's at stake for the hoteliers? First thing is the cost. So if you get a breach or a hack in your environment, the cost is going to be significant, monetary loss. It's going to be actually per cardholder data, not as a group, but if the number of credit card breaches that occur would be a significant loss for charge for each one. And it does go into the thousands. Loss of customer trust, pretty much your reputation is pretty much out the window. As an example, when the department store Kohl's got breached, there was a drop of clientele and also earnings for those quarters that went through and going forward on that. Damage to brand, well, your brand name is then publicized, especially now with social media, you know, the news and other internet sites, you know, it gets publicized. An example that occurred in the last year or two has been Arby's, Wendy's, Kmart, showing that they have been breached. And so, again, it goes back to the lack of trust. Also, the public relations nightmare on that part. Even software phone apps like Yelp that somebody can write down stating that, you know, your business got hacked and somebody's reviewing it, you know, that consumer might not want to visit your location then. And the bottom line at the end, unfortunately, some businesses, even if sometimes they're small, those costs and loss of customers can sometimes be harsh for them, and they'll lose, they can't survive and lose customers where they have to actually close their business. Next. So just to start off as a trifecta, overall there's 3 security measures that we have of technology that help maximize your security against hackers, along with lowering your PCI compliance scope. So the first one is the EMV. Again, it's the chip card. So when you insert the card, that helps out with having to defend against card-present fraud with the counterfeit. Next. Next step is point-to-point encryption, and that's another layer of security that we add along with EMV. Point-to-point encryption, that security begins at the card and swipe. The point-to-point encryption software immediately encrypts the cardholder data so that no sensitive data is actually being processed or stored on your PMS or POS system. True point-to-point encryption is meets and exceeds the PCI DSS standards. And next. And the third step is tokenization. Pretty much tokenization is when the credit card data is replaced with a randomly generated alphanumeric representation of the card data. And that sensitive credit card data is stored here in Las Vegas and also in Texas. So at no point is any of the card data stored again in your environment. And part of the token, all it is letters, numbers, and characters that will be in your environment, either in your PMS system with SkyTouch and dollars a net with Shift4. Now, we invented the technology back in 2004 and went market over in 2005. Again, it replaces all the data that you have and stored. All right, so just to walk you through how the process takes off from the beginning, where you have the customer insert their chip-enabled credit card. So you have the EMV device. That card is inserted. At that point, you have that first layer of security, well, not security, but the protection from the EMV with the chip. So it detects if the card is authentic or not, or if it's counterfeit. At that point, while it's trying to get an authorization, point-to-point encryption software then encrypts the card as it's traveling over to get an authorization from Visa, MasterCard, or American Express. And then on the way back, as it's traveling back with the authorization, whether it's approved or declined, it changes into a token. And at that point, it's stored. That token is stored in your PMS system or POS system. So again, throughout that whole travel, no cardholder information is stored. Again, all of this helps reduce your PCI compliance scope, and it helps you from any kind of breach or hack. Next. All right, so the process is identifying your processor. with EMV terminals, they have to get injected. So we have the processor PIN key, you have the Shift4 point-to-point encryption software key, and so we have a listing of distributors that we can recommend if needed to, or the processors can just have to make sure that they're able to send it out to a distributor so it can be injected correctly. At that point, you order through them, they'll send it back to you, all prepared, so all you need to do is just either plug it in through your USB port in the back of the workstation, or if you're going through Ethernet, just plug it into the outlet. Next. All right, these are just three of the couple of dozen EMV devices that Shift4 supports and able to inject the point-to-point encryption with Ingenico. As you see on the right side, the Ingenico IPP320, that's pretty much just the basic standard swipe and insert. So you can use a mag swipe on the right side or insert on the front. It is a black and white screen. On the left side, you have the two models, the ISC250 and the ISC480. They're both pretty similar. They're touch screen. So one of the benefits there is the customer can then sign their name on the screen than having to sign it on the receipt, and it does retain that signature on our downloaded the net software. On the ISC480, that's pretty much the higher end, has all the bells and whistles. If you wanted to do full motion video, you can do any kind of marketing. If locations have, say for example, restaurants, bar, spa, if you have a gift shop, you can do videos on those screens for the guests to view as they're either checking in and inserting their cards. All these devices, again, they're all injected with point-to-point encryption software, and they have that capability whether you wanted to use either USB, serial port, or Ethernet connection. Next. All right, just a little bit about Shift4. We've been doing PIN debit for over 30 years. Our software that we have is Dollars on the Net. That's our comprehensive accounting software that businesses use daily. We are the largest independent gateway and service. Again, we are private, so we also are very processor neutral. So we're not governed by any bank or any merchant processor. And the main thing is also we hold 9 patents, which 7 of them are for the P2P software. Okay. At Shift4, we've been with SkyTouch for over 10 years, and happy with them, and help their clients in any way to sometimes even help out with costs. I said as before, we are processor neutral, and sometimes we can go and assist them with monthly costs on their processor. We are integrated with them with EMV and point-to-point encryption and tokenization. They're all certified. All the terminals that we use with to work with SkyTouch PMS system. All right. Well, thank you there, and back to you, Joshua.
So much, Jimmy, and thank you, Charlie. We are now ready for our Q&A session. If any of you have questions, please type them in the WebEx chat bar on the bottom where it says Q&A. We do have one question to start from Raj Patel. He says, what can we do with a no-show chargeback that is being disputed that shows card present? Sounds like that's one for Jimmy. Do you want to take that one?
Sure. I don't know if they're talking about an EMV device or not, but that's a good takeaway. I can look into that and get back to Mr. Patel.
Sounds like we have another one, Payush Baguette. Because when we switch merchant service, we have send equipment for re-injection, causing inconvenience and cost.
I would say it depends on who did the injection originally. If you are changing from one processor to another, we normally recommend to send it to a distributor to correctly re-inject the merchant processor's PIN key, and along with the P2PE software at the same time. Sometimes if it goes through the merchant processor, it's not done correctly, so I don't know if that was the situation, but in my experience, when we've resend them back to the distributors to re-inject it, they're done correctly.
Yeah, and that's part of the technology. Security is that those devices are specific to your property as well as your merchant account, and it's part of the core security elements of EMV. It is much more of a hassle than you used to be able to buy a mag stripe and it didn't matter. But it's a pain, but I think it's a feature to get the security that we're looking to get with this process.
Yeah, pretty much what they're doing is just removing it and resetting everything all clean again because of the new processor.
Once again, a big thank you to our panelists. On your screen, we have put the contact information for both SkyTouch and Shift4. We thank you once again and wish you a great rest of your day.